Hey, and welcome to Bookends. I'm Matea Roach. I remember exactly where I was when I first heard the music of Kate Bush. I was in my grade 11 English class. It was all-girls Catholic school, and we were reading Wuthering Heights. My teacher pulled up the music video for Kate Bush's song inspired by the novel, also called Wuthering Heights. And in the video, Kate is literally glowing in a white dress against a dark background. She's doing this exaggerated, kind of balletic dance, almost like a possessed marionette doll. And my class watched that music video on repeat and danced along to it so many times that I can still actually do a lot of the choreography. That was how I first stepped into the strange and electrifying world of Kate Bush. And then I dove into Kate's back catalog, watching all of her videos and listening to her whole discography, including 1985's Hounds of Love. So when I saw there was a new book out diving into the world of Hounds of Love, I knew I wanted to talk to its author. Leah Kardos is a musician, writer, and teacher living in London, England. Her book is part of the 33 1/3 series, which are these tiny little books that focus on individual albums. You may have seen them at your local record shop or indie bookstore. In Hounds of Love, Leah not only tells the remarkable story of how Kate Bush's album came to be and why it had a massive resurgence in 2022, but she also paints a portrait of Kate as a visionary storyteller whose influence is undeniable. I'm so pleased to have Leah Kardos join me from our London studio. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
So I just told my story about how I was first introduced to Kate Bush. When did you first hear Kate's music and feel a connection to it?
It's a really good question. I grew up in Australia, so the Kate Bush culture was a little bit different. It was really about the videos and the singles in Australia. So I remember growing up and seeing Cloudbusting video and being quite mystified by it. And yes, just like you, seeing the Wuthering Heights. But for me, it was the one in the red dress, the one outside, which I found really captivating. I think certainly as a little girl, there was a lot to identify with, the sort of playfulness and the ethereal magic of what she was doing and how she was. Not just the sound, but also just the way she was in her body and the way she moved. I was really quite struck by her when I was young, but I really connected with her music later in life when I went to music college and, you know, was playing the piano and trying to sing songs and really trying to feel my way around the way she felt around songs with chords and melody. And that's when I sort of started becoming obsessed and joined the fandom. But I think the real moment for me where it was love was Ariel, the album she did in 2005. That for me was just the thing that sort of tilted the axis of my world. And then I went back and really took it seriously and went back through the catalogue and really spent time. And that's when, classic albums like Hounds of Love and The Dreaming and The Sensual Worlds really started speaking to me. So it was a gradual thing. It wasn't like a time and place so much.
What was it about Ariel, do you think, that made you think, I want to go back and really dive into the full body of work? Was it something about when it came out, where you were at that point in 2005?
Yeah, I think it really did sort of speak to me like in my adulthood. I was in my 30s and it was so mature and so humane, but also about nature and about motherhood and about domesticity and about losing a parent. And then that whole second side, which is just about a lovely day out in nature and how profound I felt it was. And it really kind of tapped into the power of music and production and how you can be quite risk-taking and also ambitious with it, but without sort of making it all about yourself. I just really was struck by her artistry and how she did that.
I want to return to Hounds of Love as the album that you chose to write about, though. I know that writing for the 33 1/3 series is really competitive. They get so many pitches every year, and I imagine you have to be very passionate about the thing you want to write about. Why was Hounds of Love the album that you wanted to write a book about?
So it means so much because she produced it herself, and it's So kick-ass. You know, like it's so immaculate and elegant, but original. The fact that she did it herself and the storyline of how she fought for her autonomy in order to work in this way. I really wanted to talk about it. You know, I teach record production, and one of the things about my subject area is that it's really male-dominated, and the whole music industry, particularly studio cultures, is patriarchal and still male-controlled. And to have a female artist who writes her own material but also produces it in her own environment is a really powerful thing. And in all of the discourses that I read about Kate, you know, it's not very often that she is talked about as a producer, an elite producer. I believe she is. So I was really motivated to talk about that and to kind of contribute to the history of women in studios being amazing.
I absolutely want to dive into that history of Hounds of Love as an amazing work of production and the context in which it was created. But before that, I think one thing that a lot of people now associate with Hounds of Love, weirdly, when we're talking about it in 2025, is the sort of resurgence that the album had as a result of Stranger Things and its engagement with this song in particular.
And if only could, I'd make a deal with God, and I'd get him to swap our places. Be running up that road, be running up that hill, be running up that building. See if only could.
They can't help you, Max. There's a reason you hide from them.
You're not really here.
I love that with the extra strings, the extra Hollywood drama instruments added. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, that was Kate Bush with Running Up That Hill from her album Hounds of Love. And then we also heard, Leah, as you just said, a clip from the Netflix series Stranger Things, where we have that string orchestration treatment of it. So that song was used throughout the show's fourth season in 2022 as part of the score, but also a fundamental part of the story arc of one of the characters.
Yes.
Why was Running Up That Hill a good fit for Stranger Things?
Okay, so first of all, it's a really good fit because obviously it's perfect for the era. So chronologically, it fits in the timing of season 4, Stranger Things. Max is one of the main characters of this friend group, and she is sort of drawn into the dark underworld of Vecna, who's the sort of monster who traps her. But her friends play this song, which she obsessively listens to, Kate Bush, Hounds of Love, on cassette. And she's often seen in the series listening to it and kind of shutting out the world around her. But they play the song and it sort of brings her back. And in that scene, she remembers her friends and she remembers that she loves them and that they love her. And it gives her the strength to escape Vecna's lair. And it's actually, I mean, it sounds a bit, I don't know, naff when I describe it with my words, but it's a pretty powerful moment in the show. And it's also used as like a leitmotif all the way through. Like you can hear it subtly woven into the underscoring of many scenes. And played as a needle drop like at least more than twice, maybe 3 times. So yeah, they got their money's worth for sure.
There are a lot of really iconic songs from that era that have been used in Stranger Things from season 1 onwards.
Yeah.
I remember the one that really got me was Elijah by New Order, used in season 1.
Yes.
But Running Up That Hill is the song, I would say, that blew up as a result of having been used in Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that resurgence a little bit and what it's been like, I guess, to be engaging with Kate Bush's work at a time that a lot of people who didn't grow up with it and have that, you know, many decades-long engagement that you've had have been really getting into it?
Yeah, well, straight away it was just super gratifying to see younger generations discovering Kate Bush and discovering this music. And it was also really interesting because you could see from online comments that people were surprised that the song was as old as it was. I suppose it had really good timing in that, you know, pop music was also flirting with nostalgic aesthetics and synthwave. And so it did sound like music that was coming out in 2021, 2022. It didn't sound dated. And I think a lot of its resurgence, I mean, there's crazy statistics, right? She got like a couple of Guinness World Records and she surpassed 1 billion streams and added more to her, record-breaking history in this regard. Really amazing, miraculous story. And I think at the time, when that song came back into everyone's consciousness, it was, the second year or the third year, getting into lockdown life. And, it was a different world we emerged into. And it was a frightening one where there was climate collapse and there was wars and scary politics and a lot of people who were angry and a lot of people with issues that were exacerbated by their isolation. And so when you have a song that's about connection and about wanting to connect with somebody in an impossible way, that kind of aspiration and the yearning of the music, I think, speaks to people. And I think there's something in it. It was certainly for me in that moment, it was a tonic. It felt like a dose of medicine. It was like, oh, the world can be good. And yeah, we can actually empathize with each other. And if only we could connect,
I completely agree with that. Like, I have had that experience really with the whole Hounds of Love album, feeling that strength and softness, that duality that you were talking about is a tonic and a balm. I think for me, Cloudbusting is the song that I go to the most in times of deep personal turmoil.
Right.
But people will find their own, I guess, solace in it. And it's been really beautiful for me to watch, people that are, a bit younger than me dive into this world that I was exposed to by a teacher initially. I want to talk about Hounds of Love as a whole album and the narrative that permeates throughout it. Because as I said, like, I think the whole album does what you're talking about with Running Up That Hill, that it's a sort of dreamy, distorted world. There's pain, but also hope. There's softness, there's strength. For listeners who aren't familiar with Hounds of Love, how would you describe Kate's vision for this project?
I think a lot of people have listened to and thought about this album as an album in two halves. You see a lot of people describe it as like there's side A and it's full of bangers. And then side B is this connected conceptual suite where there's a narrative. But I subscribe to the theory that the whole thing is conceptual from beginning to end, and you have a kind of daylight side and then you have a dream side. You have a side that is talking about the ambiguity of love and the fraughtness of relationships. Also talking about nature, like not just human nature, but also Mother Nature and, having to grow up. And then on side B, you have a dreamscape where these concepts are kind of illustrated in a narrative of going through something really difficult. Like, the protagonist that Kate Bush presents is a woman who's lost at sea and who's edging in and out of consciousness.
There's something moving under ice, through water, trying to get out.
But the themes still persist. You still have these fraught themes of wanting to connect with somebody, wanting to thank your family for loving you unconditionally, going through something incredibly difficult, but discovering the light at the end of the tunnel. So this kind of hope in darkness. And so these themes permeate throughout both sides. And I think Kate, in her production, very deftly connects and signposts these things, whether it's like the echoes of the yayoes, the yayo, yo-yos that happen across sides, or the Fairlight samples that she repeats, the strange sort of meowing Fairlight sound that you hear in Running Up That Hill appears again. All of those little tissues of connection, I think, make the whole thing really rich. And certainly coming into writing this book, I kind of was aware that there was something there structurally, but spending time beholding her craft really sort of made me see the thing with fresh eyes and listen to it with fresh ears. And so it's been an absolute gift to write about. And of course, that was the thing I was anxious about, writing about an album that everyone knows so well, or thinks they know inside out like I did. So I was really, a little bit scared to write a Wikipedia book, I didn't want to do that. So yeah, I think it's an album that has these amazing depths to it and that she put a lot of effort into putting detail into. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure writing about it. I miss writing it, actually.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's quite a testament. I think a lot of people, when they finish writing a book, are like, thank God that's over. What a project. So to finish writing something and think, wow, I wish I could go back into that world.
Absolutely.
It's really quite amazing. There's so much in that response that I just want to dive into. But I promised earlier that I would go back to the production history of Hounds of Love. And we're talking a bit more about production now. So it feels like a good time. Hounds of Love is the second album that Kate Bush self-produced. She had also self-produced The Dreaming in 1982. But it was the first time that she was making music in this brand new studio that she had actually built for herself on her parents' farm in the English countryside. And you're talking about the familial themes to this album. So it feels like there's a connection there. Why did she make this move back to her childhood home to produce this album?
So I think when she was making The Dreaming, she was spending a lot of money, EMI's money. Because, if you wind back one album previous, it was Never Forever, and that was a huge hit. And she had shared production duties on that one. She didn't have full control of the chair, but she had more of a say when it came to arrangements. And you can really hear it on that album. You can hear the whole palette just sort of explode with color and lots of ideas. And really the theater of the imagination starts to get engaged. But with The Dreaming, it's got a very maximalist aesthetic where she's creating worlds, but like worlds for each song. It's like kind of quantum leaping through lots of different realities. And she had like every big studio in London on the go. And I think at one point she had all the spaces at Abbey Road. There's like about 3 or 4 studios there. She had them all booked. And the album didn't do as well as EMI wanted it to. And there was, I guess, this inference that perhaps she shouldn't produce the next one. And so there's this wonderful interview from like 1992 where Kate Bush is saying, well, I actually, just to save them time, I just built my own studio, save them money, because it was about not feeling comfortable to be creative. I think it's what she said, that the pressure and the kind of having the money and the clock kind of ticking put pressure on her, and she needs time and space and to feel comfortable in her environment. So I think her sort of fighting for this autonomy, but also skilling up magnificently. I mean, wow, imagine like sort of, doing your first production in all of these, quite sophisticated spaces, to then having the knowledge to create your own space, but also to manage a project like this across, 2 years of development, and for it to come out sounding so accomplished. There are moments on Hounds of Love which I find breathtaking. I mean, in terms of production, there's a moment in And Dream of Sheep where she sings every gull a seeking craft, and underneath that line she has a surge of orchestral music that's taken from, I think, the arrangement of Hello Earth, and she's put it there and she's combined it with the sound of a cresting wave, the sound effect, and she's added a seagull.
Every gull a seeking craft, I can't keep my eyes open.
And that would have taken so long to do with tape. She would have had to have like spliced that thing together. She would have had to have put effects on it. It would have been such a painstaking affair to make that little sound effect, and yet the whole of the album is full of moments like that. And I think, when you listen to the detail of what she's put in there, she's right. She couldn't have worked in other spaces and shifted her project around and, had people from the label coming in going, how much this is costing? It's just no way.
Mm. I'm glad you mentioned the sort of technological element of production, because one thing that we have to remember, and it can be difficult, especially for people like me that have grown up kind of in the age of sampling is easy to do, computers are very sophisticated. A lot of sampling technology and synthesizer technology and all of these things that Kate was using on the production of this album were basically brand new at the time that she was producing Hounds of Love. You mentioned the Fairlight, which for folks that are not familiar is a synthesizer and sampler that was very new and revolutionary at the point where Kate was producing this album. Can you talk a bit about the Fairlight and how she was pushing the boundaries of how it could be used on Hounds of Love? Like, what impact did her access to that technology have on this album?
Yeah, the Fairlight is a whole thing. I mean, it was the first digital sampler. So up until that point, you had the ability to put a bit of sound on a tape and maybe make a little keyboard like a Mellotron or a Chamberlain. And you could the flute from the beginning of Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles. That's an example of early sampling. But with this one, you could essentially make any sound musical. So you could record smashing glass, like, for example, the outro, the last sound you hear on Babushka from 1980, or weird sort of pots and pans and gunshot sounds like from Mother Stands for Comfort. And Kate and, also I have to say Peter Gabriel, they were the two kind of innovators of this kind of sampling the world and making it uncanny. And I guess that for me as a listener, it opens up a little window to something magical, something liminal, something in between. And her use of sampling is amazing on Hounds of Love because it's not conspicuous. It's just bringing in that kind of unusual, uncanny edge right where it needs to. And casting everything in a certain light, which I think is brilliant. I mean, particularly on like Cloudbusting, because you've got real strings and then you've got the fake string that comes in. And so you're like, okay, that's a choice. She had the strings right there. It's not like she didn't have access to them. So the fact that this is an uncanny, otherworldly sound, and I think that is the Fairlight speaking, she's really making the Fairlight sing in an expressive way. It's sort of saying something that the real instrument cannot. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've ever tried or if you've seen like the interface, but it's crazy complicated. Like there's this fake version you can get, this like free version you can put on your computer, which I was trying to play with, and I've got a PhD, man, and I still had trouble trying to figure that thing out. It's complicated.
You've been bringing up the song Cloudbusting, so what a perfect opportunity to talk about the role of, nature and weather on that song in particular. Cloudbusting was the second single from Hounds of Love. Let's listen to a little bit of it now.
I still dream of Organon. I wake up crying. You're making rain, and you're just in reach. When you in sleep escape me, you're like my yo-yo that glowed in the dark. What made it special, made it dangerous, so I bury it and forget. But every time it rains, you're here in my head, like the sun coming out. Ooh, I just know that something good is gonna happen. I don't know when, but just saying it could even make it happen. On top of the world.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh my God, yeah, it's so good. I'm like nodding my head along in the studio. That was Cloudbusting by Kate Bush from the 1985 album Hounds of Love. Now that song has a really interesting backstory, and it takes its inspiration from this 20th century psychoanalyst and kind of inventor, this guy Wilhelm Reich. And Kate had read Wilhelm Reich's son's autobiography in the mid-1970s. How did that book inspire this song? Because it's a fascinating story.
Yeah. The book is really good, actually. I managed to get it from Amazon and gave it a read. And yeah, it's also, like Hounds of Love, it's also part dream. He dreams, it's called Book of Dreams, and a lot of the time he's in the present and he's struggling as an adult. And then he dreams scenarios from his childhood. And the images are quite sad because he's recalling his relationship with his father. And his father was quite a strong character, to say the least. Not in a bad way, but just, had a lot of flavor, that guy. And the way he remembers life is like sort of being quite isolated with his father and an only child, and quite inspired by his father's research, and the cloudbusting device was part of his memory. But he remembers troubling things like, being told he can't have a toy, he has to bury it, seeing his father being taken away by the authorities, and all of the sort of sad feelings that he has about his what he remembers about his childhood. It's an amazing book. It's really emotional. And the song as well, I think, really deftly captures that feeling. It's this sort of optimistic but also melancholy vibe. There's a bit of sweetness to the song, which is note perfect, matches the book really well. And, the song is not about Wilhelm Reich so much as it's about a son trying to make sense of a father who has died, and reckoning with memory. But also the lyric that really gets me is the, just saying it could even make it happen, this sort of magical thinking. This idea that, even as an old adult, he still wants to believe in the magic that he believed in as a kid. And I think that's just such a lovely thing as a theme that kind of permeates Hounds of Love as well, this not wanting to grow up.
Yeah, I think that I just know that something good is going to happen, just saying it can even make it happen. That's the lyric that I mentioned way earlier in our conversation, that this is a song I come back to a lot. And that is, I think, out of anything from this album, the thing that I cling to during difficult times. It's like walking around and listening to that on repeat, just like, okay, yep. I can get through whatever problem I'm having right now.
Yes.
What do you think it was about this story that made Kate Bush want to write a song about it? What drew her to this book and caused her to be like, I need to write about this. I need to engage with this?
I know she's spoken a little bit about it in sort of terms of I picked up the book and the story really stayed with me. She wrote to her fan group about it. She used to write letters to the fan club, and she sort of talked about the book being sad, and she was drawn to the sadness of it, which, when you listen to Cloudbusting, as you say, it has a kind of optimism to it that's really touching. But it's this childish optimism, which I think is the key to understanding Kate's reading of that book. And, it's not the first time she's had a book be the kind of starting point for a song idea, and she's quite literary in that respect, as we know. But, the book, I think without Cloudbusting, it probably would have been totally obscure and forgotten by history. But as a result, people go seek out this book, and it's such a rewarding thing. Because, I think it went out of print at one point, and then because of Hounds of Love, it was reprinted, and now it's kind of available for people to access, which is great.
Leah, I want to flip the metaphorical record, so to speak, the literal record, and turn things over to side B. You mentioned earlier that the 7 songs that make up this side are sort of all connected, and they tell a story about this woman who is lost at sea. Kate Bush has called this story The Ninth Wave, and she actually referred to it as her novelette, following with that theme of her being quite a literary person. Why do you think this character of a woman lost at sea appealed to Kate?
She has talked about being inspired by films, particularly images of people like shipwrecked or people jumping off a ship into the ocean, and just the image of being lost at sea as a kind of metaphor for, any kind of situation you find challenging in life. I think it works really well in terms of the elemental themes that are at play. On Hounds of Love, there's a lot of rain and clouds going on side A. And certainly Cloudbusting works itself up into a fever of kind of magic in the end. And you can hear the thunder crack and you can hear the rain fall. And then as soon as you flip the record over, she's now, helpless, sort of stranded in the drowning dream. And so all of a sudden, a flood has occurred. So I think thematically, these big themes about nature and the power of nature. And all of a sudden now, nature at its scariest.
I was there at the birth, out of the cloudburst, the head of the tempest. Murderer, murderer of time. Why did I go? Why did I
That's the storyline of the Ninth Wave. And I think the name The Ninth Wave has loads of references. Like it's I think on the back of the vinyl and the CD, she quotes a verse from Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, The Idylls of the King, The Coming of Arthur, where the mythical King Arthur of Avalon was plucked out of the ocean and born of the ocean by the wizard Merlin, and on the ninth wave, which is full of flame. And then, there's this folkloric sort of sea folklore thing about the every ninth wave being the largest and most dangerous. So, all of these lovely ideas about sort of, facing a really big challenge. It works really well because it puts this protagonist, Kate, the person who's singing, in a situation where you can empathize with her. And it also gives you this lovely space where she might be awake, or she might be dreaming or fighting for her life or having a nightmare.
You must wake up.
Wake up, man.
So it gives her lots of scope as well to work with the cinema of the imagination.
Wake up, love.
We see on the ninth wave, Kate is mainly embodying this character of this woman who's drowning or who's lost at sea. And she's known really for her embodiment of character roles in a lot of her songs, including from previous albums. She's playing the ghost of Kathy in Wuthering Heights, her first single. In Babushka, she's playing the role of kind of this spurned woman it's like a marriage story, but a marriage that's falling apart. But one song in particular from this B-side of Hounds of Love, Waking the Witch, shows Kate Bush inhabiting multiple perspectives in a single story about this witch trial. And of course, there's a lot of resonance with witch trials, often involving trying to drown a witch to see what happens. What voices does she take on in that song?
I love this song so much. She is the accused witch at some point, and she's also the witch finder general, this scary, demonic-sounding person who's accusing her of witchcraft. And she also is a crowd of people that are kind of like the jury, who answer in response. So it's really quite theatrical, the way that it's presented. And I think it just sounds amazing. It's one of my favorite tracks on the whole album.
Pinks and poses.
Winds, water,
Roses go down. Pinks and poses.
a question, not innocence. What's a local paper?
So much going on, isn't there?
There's so much. My favorite part is the yelling guilty that we heard at the very end of that clip.
Yeah. With the drums like hammering it home as well.
Mm-hmm. What do you think was being explored here? I feel like it's a very thematically powerful song.
Yeah, I think it's so rich to tease apart. There's, I mean, on the level of production, there's a lot going on. But even if we just look at the images she's working with, I feel that this song really resonates against Running Up That Hill from side A, particularly with the power of gender. In Running Up That Hill, we didn't talk about the lyrical themes, which are actually quite, I think, spicy. But you've got this idea of gender being perhaps empowering, of swapping gender with somebody and being empowered by that. And here you have the disempowering aspect of gender, the idea of a witch being tried. There are references going back to, I believe there's a novel called The Witch of Blackbird Pond, and that's also about, the suspicion of women and women's intuition. And, I mean, on top of that, you've also got this sort of evocation of Bert Lloyd's Blood Red Roses, which is, she's interpolated that, and that's from Moby Dick. And we bring all these layers into it. The more you think about it and the more you listen to it, you're like, oh my goodness, there's so much going on here.
It's, again, a very rich literary and historical text almost in that one song.
Yeah.
During the making of Hounds of Love, Kate also traveled to Ireland with her creative and romantic partner, Del Palmer. And we can hear some Irish influence for sure as we get further along into the second side of this record. What drew Kate to Ireland, and how did that trip inspire the production of some of the stuff on the Ninth Wave?
She went to Ireland to work with Bill Whelan and his group, the Chieftains. But she also had, on her mother's side, family in Ireland. And from my research, I found out that on this trip, she went and sort of reconnected with that side of her family and was embraced by all these aunts and uncles and cousins that she'd never known existed, but also spent time on the coast and, really kind of getting an elemental dose is what she said, an elemental dose. And that's when she wrote a lot of the lyrics to the project. And I think this kind of, if you can imagine these bluffs and like sort of crashing waves and, harsh rocks and sheer edges where, green hills meet raging ocean and wild skies. I mean, you can really kind of feel that in the production. And, obviously the Irish elements, some of those musicians come through in a kind of hot-blooded way in Jig of Life, which is, again, another one of my favorite pieces. But, on top of just being cool and being an Irish reference and actually part of her heritage, the fact that the Irish music shows up in Jig of Life in such a way, I think, is definitely thematically lovely.
Hello, old lady. I know your face well. I know it well. She says, na 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 na. Be sitting in your mirror now is the place where the crossroads meet. Will you look into the future? Never, never say goodbye to my heart of your life. Oh, no, 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 no. Let me live. She said, come on and let me live, girl. She said, come on and let me live, girl. This moment in time,
She said,
it doesn't belong to you.
she said,
It belongs to me and your little boy and your little girl. And the one hand clapping where on your palm is my little line. When you're written in mine as an old memory. Na 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 na. Never, never, never say goodbye to my part of your life.
We hear the Greek like bouzouki. We didn't even get to the kind of fiddle breakdown
Yeah.
that makes me feel like I'm, at a Kaylee or whatever. But we have this great line that's very emphatic, come on, let me live. And, again, is really, I think, tapping into a lot of the themes from the rest of the album. It's this darkness, but also optimism, this persistence. Like, how do you understand the lyrics in Jig of Life?
When I read the lyrics of Jig of Life, what I understand is that she is visited by herself from a future, and this is the hello old lady. I know your face well, and it's a future self that says you got to come back and you got to live, and you have to live not just for me but for your little boy and your little girl, your children. And this future that, you can't let that future go. You have to fight for it. And I think it's such a poetic and powerful image of matriarchs, mothers, particularly in the context of the music references that are here. And the kind of dramatic, I put this moment here, I put this moment here, this breakdown at the end of the Irish bit.
I put this moment
over here. Over here. Can't you see where memories...
And then, her brother comes in and reads this poem, which is like talking about the convergence of now and when and then on the curl of the wave.
Waiting for then when the life spray cools. For now does ride in on the curl of a wave. And you will dance me in the sunlit pools.
It's this lovely idea of just like the past and the future and the present at a crossroads.
And all that's to come runs in with the thrust on the strand.
One thing that you do get to in your book is you talk about how Hounds of Love has had this kind of projecting influence into the future, into contemporary music. And you talk about some of the, currently working musicians who cite Kate Bush and particularly this album as a major influence. We see a lot of female artists, producers, people like Tori Amos, Bjork, and Grimes, but also hip hop stars like Big Boy from Outkast, citing Kate Bush as a major influence. Why do you think Kate's legacy has been so wide-ranging and profound for so many people?
Her storyline of doing what she wanted to do at her own pace and being in control, I think, is really influential, particularly with artists that are perhaps a minority in a mainstream scene. Women have always been doing their own thing. They've always had to. But Kate really was the first one in the UK who did it herself and was mainstream success with it. There's this crazy storyline of her being the first woman to do anything in pop music in the UK, the first to write her own number one, the first to have a number one album, and on and on and on and on and on. And so no other artist was mainstream mega visible doing this stuff and doing it with such vision and originality and with such an authentic voice. And I think, it's easy to take that for granted today in a world where we have Björk, in a world where we have a Taylor Swift who can write her own songs and produce her own songs and do that. In the UK, at least, we didn't have female figures like that. And really her visibility, I found a lot of anecdotal evidence of artists sort of saying she proved that women could produce and do serious work and work with concepts and do big work. And they're not just, a clever little lady that knows how to do something, or, this kind of condescending idea of women in pop being vacuous. And because of Kate and because of her example, we have such a rich tradition, not only of women taking risks and working with technology and engaging with big ideas through their production and being autonomous, but also we have a tradition of women kind of leaning into the ethereal as an aesthetic. And I think that's also another fascinating tangent as well, working with femininity, but in a quite profound way. And there's definitely a lineage of ethereal artists that come from Hounds of Love and its predecessor, The Dreaming.
Yeah, the word ethereal, you talk about the fact that ethereal is now listed as like a genre on Spotify, that it's a descriptor that we can apply to all sorts of music. And Kate is really one of the first,
yes,
I think, in that lineage. You get these playlists that are her and like Cocteau Twins and Bjork and Grimes.
Yes.
You're also a musician who I would say creates work in that lineage, who's drawn inspiration from Kate Bush. And you even have a Kate Bush lyric tattooed on your wrists. You actually mentioned that line, "I put this moment here," earlier. Why did you choose that as something to put on your body? If that's okay to ask. I realize it's kind of a personal question for some folks.
Yeah, no, I don't mind talking about it. It was partly a way to mark the moment of the book. It was to celebrate the book, but also just to remember working with my hands and doing the craft and really what I learned from working on this book. It's a lesson to myself that in my own practices, whatever they are, whether it's writing books or making music or teaching at work, I want to have that intentionality and that clarity that Kate had, that clarity of vision. I long for that. So that's me kind of wanting to remember every time I look down at my hands that I want to own this moment and I want to put that moment intentionally here. And so, yeah, it's about having control as well, which is another thing that Kate has that I want.
I am someone who also has song lyric tattoos, so I understand that desire to have almost a reminder to yourself that's going to be a bit of a guiding light as you go about your work or go about your life. I want to ask, we've played a couple of songs from Hounds of Love throughout the course of our conversation, and I've gotten to choose all of them, and we've not let you pick a song. So is there a song from Hounds of Love that we haven't played yet that you'd like to leave us with today?
There's so many to choose, but I think one of the moments that really gives me joy is the latter part of Hounds of Love, where, this tension has been building up. It's almost like Bernard Herrmann kind of choppy strings. It's almost like horror movie kind of tension, and she's running from these dogs. And then she kind of explodes into this, what I really need, what I really need, I need love. And it's like this playful surrender at the end of Hounds of Love, which I find so joyous.
Take your shoes off and throw them in the lake. Do you know what I really need? Do you know what I really need? Yeah.
Leah, thank you so much for chatting with us today. I have really, really enjoyed getting to dive deep into this album with you.
Oh, thank you so much for chatting to me. I've enjoyed it too.
Leah Kardos is the author of Hounds of Love, part of Bloomsbury's 33 and a Third series. She joined me from our studio in London. Throughout the show, you heard music from Kate Bush's 1985 album Hounds of Love, released by EMI. All of the songs were written and produced by Kate Bush. This episode was produced by Katie Swales with help from Eileen Yamamoto. Our senior producer is Jacqueline Kirk, and our executive producer is Aaron Balser. Big thank you to our audio techs Aronde Williams and Gabby Hagarillas, and to the entire CBC Books team. You can tune in on Sundays and Wednesdays on CBC Radio, or follow Bookends on the podcast app of your choice. And if you're listening on podcasts, don't forget to leave us a review. It really helps to get the word out to other potential listeners. I'm Matea Roach, and this is Bookends. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Because when the book ends, the conversation begins.